Good evening, class. My name is Shanita Sanks, and tonight I'm going to share with you one of the heroines of the American Revolution, Miss Jane McCrae. McCrae's life was extraordinary. Actually, it's not really what makes her so heroic. What makes the story of her life interesting is how she died is what really characterized her heroism. And so tonight I'm going to share with you the story of Jane McCrae. As you recall, the Battle of Saratoga was the turning point of the American Revolution. It was at this battle that the French provided aid to the American colonists. And obviously the American colonists won. But did you know that the unfortunate demise of Jane McCrae sparked support for the Patriot cause and contributed to the American victory at Saratoga? But who is Jane McCrae? In this discussion, as I mentioned earlier, I will explain the life and death of McCrae and how her death created such a support for the American Revolution. Jane McCrae was a young woman who was reportedly slaved by Native American soldiers who were actually allies of the British Army. Lieutenant General John Burgoyne, and if I mispronounce his name, I apologize in advance. It was reported that after her death at the hands of General Burgoyne's Native American allies, that support was aroused for the American cause and contributed to the American victory, in particularly the Battle of Saratoga, as I mentioned earlier, the turning point of the American Revolutionary War. She was born near Bedminster, Somerset County, New Jersey. Her father was a Presbyterian minister, and he served for 26 years. After her father's death in 1769, she made her home with her eldest brother John, a Princeton graduate who practiced law in Albany and married into the Beekman family, and then settled into Northumberland, New York, in the upper Hudson Valley, a few miles below the frontier of Fort Edward. She was at least 25 in 1777, not a maiden of 17 or 18 as depicted in legend, because you know when you go in history you got to sort through the legend and the facts. In New York and in New Jersey and later in New York, she was courted by loyalist David Jones. And then in the latter part of 1776, Jones departed with his Tory neighbors to join the British Army, where he became part of the forces led by General John Burgoyne, or Burgoyne. When in the summer of 1777, Burgoyne launched his invasion down the Lake Champlain-Hudson River route, and most of the Patriot troops and nearby residents evacuated Fort Edward. John McCrae, now a colonel, is said to have urged his sister to come with him to Albany, but Jane had received a letter from David informing her to basically in a few days they will march and he would be happy to meet with her, so that caused her to stay. So on the morning of July 27, 1777, Jane McCrae went to the home of her friend, Miss Sarah McNeil, who was preparing to flee Fort Edward for Albany. There shortly after noon, the two women were discovered and carried off by a band of Native Americans scouting in advance for the general's army. Miss McNeil was followed. She was delivered to the British, but unfortunately Jane McCrae's dead body was scalped and bearing bullet wounds and was found the next day near Fort Edwards. Though some historians have contended that she was accidentally shot by a party of American troops pursuing the Native Americans, the best evidence that historians have found that in a latter testimony of supposed eyewitnesses that Samuel Standish, a Native American captive being held in the vicinity, suggests that the Native Americans, the allies of General Burgoyne, probably killed her. General Burgoyne could not punish the guilty party because he would fear a backlash because they were their allies. And so he was afraid that the to punish the alleged killers will undermine their missions. and will also undermine British assertions that they were more civilized in their conduct of war. The dissemination of this propaganda reportedly contributed to the success of the Patriots because obviously justice was not served. And of course the propaganda spread, and news of the killing even spread it to London. Surrounded by its oral romantic tragedy spread through by the colonies overseas, London's 777 annual register recorded that Miss McCrae's death, quote, struck every breast with horror, unquote. In the House of Commons, Edward Burke took the occasion to denounce severely the British policy of using Native American allies. Within the northern colonies, the event, which General Horatio Gates, the American commander, quickly exploited for propaganda purposes, the growing indignation and the uneasiness on the part of the American colonists. Neutrals, alarmed for their safety, swung over to the Patriot cause. Patriot sentiment started to grow and consolidate, and a surge of new recruits strengthened Gates' forces. Within 3 months came Burgoyne's historic surrender. Colonel John McCrae buried his sister at Moses Hill near Fort Edwards. It was reported that David Jones deserted Burgoyne's army in despair and retired in the Canadian wilderness. Soon Jan McCrae became a fabled heroine of the Revolution, celebrated in ballads and poems. Philip Freneau used her story in his 1778 quote, American Independence. Joe Barlow recalled it in the 1807 the Columbiad. Mercy Warren wrote of Burgoyne's guilt in her 1805 History of the American Revolution. A French author turned the tale into a novel as early as 1784, and Delia Bacon made it into a play in 1839, The Bride of Fort Edward. In Philadelphia, the 1799 Ricketts Circus performed The Death of Miss McCrae. A pantomime co-written by John Durang and John Vanderlyn painted the portrait. And probably many of you seen that famous portrait in 1804. And James Fenimore Cooper described similar events in his novel The Last of the Mohegans, where the captured maiden was named Dora. In 1822, with suitable ceremonies, Jane McCrae's remains were removed to the old Fort Edward Cemetery. McCrae's remains have been moved 3 times. In 1852, they were moved to the Union Cemetery in Fort Edward. The body was exhumed again in 2003 in hopes of solving the mystery of his death. So her death still remained a mystery. As I was saying, this young lady's life was taken so suddenly, and her death was defined by her heroism was defined by his death. And I think that's the story of Jane McCrae is so fascinating, and because of the circumstances surrounding her death and how it sparked the American Revolution. I hope you understood a little bit of what I was trying to say about her, because she is an extraordinary woman. And have a great day.